The cargo hold of the research vessel Horizon's Edge smelled like death and medicine mixed together. A scent that made Daniel Cooper's stomach turn as he walked through the heavy metal doors. He had been on this ship for nearly 8 months now, serving as one of the few human xenobiologists in the Galactic Coalition's research fleet, and he thought he had seen everything the universe could throw at him. But he was wrong. In the far corner of the massive room, behind a shimmering blue containment field, lay a creature that took his breath away even in its current miserable state. The Voraxian Shadowcat was enormous, standing nearly 4 feet tall at the shoulder when healthy, with sleek black fur that should have gleamed like polished obsidian under the ship's artificial lights. 6 amber eyes, arranged in 2 rows of 3, should have glowed with fierce intelligence and predatory awareness. Instead, the magnificent beast lay curled in a tight ball, her breathing shallow and labored, her once beautiful coat now matted and falling out in clumps. Daniel moved closer to the containment field, his boots making soft sounds against the metal floor. He could see the creature's ribs pressing against her skin, could hear the wet rattle in her chest with every painful breath she took. This was Zira, the prized companion of Commander Vortax, leader of the Kelrani research team aboard the ship, and she was dying. The doors behind him hissed open, and Daniel turned to see a group of aliens entering the cargo hold. Commander Vortax led the way, his tall insectoid body moving with the precise, clicking steps of his species. Behind him came 3 other Telrani officers, their compound eyes reflecting the blue glow of the containment field, their antennae twitching as they assessed the situation. 2 Sithari scientists followed, their reptilian scales shifting colors slightly as they observed the dying creature. And finally, a Melvoni medical officer floated in on her hover chair, her aquatic body kept moist by the specialized equipment. "The situation has not changed," Vorthax announced, his voice a series of clicks and whistles that the universal translator rendered into flat, emotionless words. "The creature is infested with crimson threadworms, parasites that burrow into the lymphatic system of warm-blooded species and slowly drain their life force. There is no known cure among Coalition medical databases." Daniel watched as the aliens observed Zira with what he could only describe as clinical detachment. The Kelrani were cold-blooded beings who communicated through pheromones and sounds that humans found difficult to read, and they had never developed the emotional bonds with other creatures that humans considered natural. To them, Zira was an interesting specimen, a useful tool for research, but nothing more. "What are you proposing we do?" asked one of the Sithari, his forked tongue flickering out to taste the air. "Nothing," Vorthax replied. "The creature will be allowed to die naturally. Intervention would only prolong her suffering without changing the outcome. It is the logical course of action." The other aliens nodded or made gestures of agreement. The Melvani medical officer checked her datapad and confirmed that Coalition medicine had no treatment for crimson threadworms in mammalian species. The parasites were simply too aggressive, too deeply embedded in the host system by the time symptoms appeared. Daniel felt something hot and tight building in his chest. He had grown up on a farm in Nebraska, surrounded by animals of all kinds. His father had taught him that every living creature deserved care and compassion, that giving up on a sick animal was never an option as long as there was breath in its body. Watching these aliens calmly discuss letting Zira die made him feel sick in a way that had nothing to do with the smell in the room. "How long does she have?" he asked, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. Vorthax turned his compound eyes toward Daniel, and for a moment the human thought he saw something like curiosity in those alien features. 3 days, perhaps 4. The parasites will continue to multiply until her organs fail. It will not be pleasant, but it will be relatively quick. "And you're just going to leave her here to suffer?" "Suffering is a mammalian concept that my species does not fully comprehend," Vorthax replied. "We understand pain as a signal of damage, Nothing more. The creature will experience pain, yes, but she lacks the cognitive capacity to suffer in the way you imply. Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to shout that Zira was clearly suffering, that any fool could see the misery in her dimmed eyes and hear it in her labored breathing. But he knew it would be pointless. The Kalrani did not think the way humans did not feel the way humans did, and no amount of arguing would change that fundamental difference. The meeting concluded with Vorthax officially declaring Zira a lost cause. The containment field would remain active to prevent any potential spread of the parasites to other specimens aboard the ship. But no further resources would be allocated to her care. The aliens filed out of the cargo hold one by one, already discussing their next research priorities, already forgetting about the dying creature in the corner. Daniel stayed behind. He stood at the edge of the containment field for a long time, watching Zira breathe, counting the seconds between each rattling inhale and exhale. At one point, the shadow cat opened one of her 6 eyes and looked directly at him. And in that moment, Daniel saw something that the Kalrani could never understand. He saw fear, confusion, and a desperate primal hope that someone, anyone, would help her. "I'm not going to let you die," he whispered, even though he knew the creature could not understand his words. "I don't care what they say. I'm not giving up on you." He pulled out his communicator and sent a message to the one person on this ship who he knew would feel the same way he did. Lisa Brennan was a veterinary specialist who had joined the Coalition fleet 2 years ago, driven by the same curiosity about alien life that had motivated Daniel. More importantly, she was human, which meant she understood something that no other species in the galaxy seemed to grasp. Animals were not just specimens or tools, they were lives, precious and worthy of protection. And humans had spent thousands of years learning how to care for them. Lisa's response came within seconds. She was on her way. Daniel looked back at Zira, at her matted fur and her labored breathing and her eyes that held so much pain. The Kalrani might have given up on her. The Sithari might have dismissed her as a lost cause, and the Melvoni might have declared her beyond the help of Coalition medicine. But humans were different. Humans did not abandon the creatures in their care. Humans fought for them, bled for them, and sometimes died for them, because that was what it meant to be human. It was what had driven their ancestors to tame wolves and befriend cats, to heal injured birds and rescue stranded whales, to see value in every beating heart, regardless of species. And Daniel Cooper was not about to let that legacy end in the cargo hold of an alien spaceship. He sat down on the cold metal floor, as close to the containment field as he could get, and he waited for Lisa to arrive. Together, they would find a way to save Zira, or they would die trying. The universe was about to learn what humans were truly capable of when they refused to give up. Lisa Brennan arrived at the cargo hold 15 minutes after receiving Daniel's message. Her red hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her medical kit slung over one shoulder. She had been sleeping when the call came, but the urgency in Daniel's voice had pulled her out of bed faster than any alarm could have. Now, standing beside him at the edge of the containment field, she understood why. "Oh, you poor thing," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the suffering creature before them. "How long has she been like this?" "Vorthax says 3 or 4 days left," Daniel replied, his voice tight with barely contained anger. "They've decided to let her die. No treatment, no intervention, nothing. Just leave her here until her organs shut down." Lisa knelt down to get a better look at Zira through the shimmering blue barrier. The shadow cat's breathing was shallow and uneven, her magnificent fur falling out in patches, her 6 eyes clouded with pain and exhaustion. Even from this distance, Lisa could see the telltale signs of parasitic infection, the way the creature's body was slowly consuming itself as the invaders drained her life force. "Crimson thread worms," she said, pulling out her portable scanner and pointing it at the creature. I've read about them in the Coalition medical database. Nasty little things that burrow into the lymphatic system and reproduce until the host dies. The Kelrani are right about one thing. There's no standard Coalition treatment for this. So that's it? Daniel asked, unable to keep the desperation out of his voice. We just give up? Lisa looked at him with a small smile that held more determination than any battle cry. I said there's no standard Coalition treatment. I didn't say there's no treatment at all. She stood up and began pacing, her mind racing through possibilities. Back on Earth, she had spent years treating animals with parasitic infections, from heartworms in dogs to liver flukes in cattle to botflies in horses. The principles were always the same. Identify the parasite, find its weakness, and attack it while supporting the host's immune system. The crimson threadworms are similar to several Earth parasites, she explained, talking more to herself than to Daniel. They're bloodborne, they target specific organ systems, and they reproduce rapidly once established. The Coalition species have never developed effective treatments because they don't have experience with warm-blooded parasites, but we do. Daniel felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. You think Earth medicine might work? I think it's worth trying, Lisa replied. Ivermectin has been used to treat parasitic infections in mammals for decades. If I can modify the dosage and delivery method for Zira's physiology, it might be able to kill the worms without harming her. Combined with immune boosters and nutritional support, we might be able to give her body a fighting chance. What do we need? Lisa pulled up her datapad and began making a list. Access to the ship's medical synthesizers, detailed scans of Zira's internal systems, and about 48 hours of uninterrupted work. The problem is, Vorthax has already declared her a lost cause. If we ask for permission to treat her, he'll refuse. Daniel nodded slowly, understanding what she was suggesting. So we don't ask for permission. Exactly. It was a risk, a huge risk, that could end both of their careers and possibly result in formal charges of insubordination. The Galactic Coalition had strict rules about following chain of command, and deliberately disobeying a direct order from the mission commander was not something that would be overlooked. But as Daniel looked at Zira, at her suffering and her fading hope, he knew there was no other choice. I can disable the containment field's monitoring systems, he said. It'll take about an hour to bypass the security protocols without triggering an alert. That should give us a window to work without anyone knowing. Lisa nodded. I'll head to the medical bay and start synthesizing the medications. The synthesizers are automated, so no one should question what I'm making, as long as I use my own access codes. Meet me back here in 2 hours. They separated, each moving with purpose through the ship's corridors. Daniel made his way to the engineering section, where he used his credentials as a xenobiologist to access the containment systems. It was technically within his job description to monitor specimen containment, so his presence wouldn't raise any red flags. The tricky part was disabling the alarms without leaving a trace. His fingers moved quickly over the control panel, calling up lines of code that he had studied during his training. The Kelrani designed their systems with efficiency in mind, which meant there were always shortcuts and back doors for those who knew where to look. Within an hour, he had created a loop in the monitoring software that would make it appear as though the containment field was functioning normally, even when it wasn't. Meanwhile, Lisa worked in the medical bay, carefully measuring and mixing compounds that the Coalition had never thought to combine. Ivermectin formed the base of her antiparasitic cocktail, modified with enzymes that would help it bind to the specific proteins found in crimson thread worms. She added immune stimulants derived from earth plants, vitamin complexes designed for feline physiology, and a mild sedative that would help keep Zira calm during the treatment. By the time she returned to the cargo hold, her medical kit was full of syringes, IV bags, and monitoring equipment. Daniel was waiting for her, his face pale but determined. "The alarms are disabled," he reported. "We have maybe 6 hours before the next scheduled security check. After that, someone might notice the loop in the system." "Then we better work fast," Lisa replied. She stepped up to the containment field controls and entered the deactivation sequence. The blue shimmer flickered once, twice, then faded away entirely, leaving nothing between them and the dying Shadowcat. Zira lifted her head weakly at the change, her clouded eyes trying to focus on the 2 humans approaching her. Daniel's heart pounded as they moved closer. Despite her weakened state, Zira was still a predator, still equipped with claws that could tear through flesh and teeth that could crush bone. If she perceived them as a threat, she could lash out with whatever strength she had left. But Lisa showed no fear. She approached slowly, her voice soft and soothing, speaking words that Zira could not understand but could somehow feel. "It's okay, beautiful girl. We're here to help you. No one's going to hurt you." Zira's ears, large and tufted with black fur, twitched at the sound. Her nostrils flared as she caught their scent, so different from the cold, chemical smell of the Kelrani. Something in the creature's posture shifted, relaxed, as if she recognized on some instinctive level that these beings were not like the others. Lisa knelt beside her, one hand extended palm up in the universal gesture of peace. "That's it, sweetheart. We're friends. We're going to make you feel better." Daniel watched in amazement as Zira, the fearsome Varaxian Shadowcat, leaned her massive head against Lisa's palm and closed her eyes. In that moment, he understood something that the Kelrani would never grasp. Connection between species was not about logic or efficiency. It was about trust, compassion, and the willingness to reach across the void of difference and offer kindness. And that was something only humans truly understood. The first injection was the hardest. Lisa held the syringe steady as she searched for a vein beneath Zira's matted fur. Her fingers gentle but firm as she navigated the unfamiliar anatomy. Varaxian Shadowcats were not like Earth felines. Their circulatory systems were more complex, with multiple heart chambers and blood vessels that ran in patterns different from anything Lisa had encountered before. But the principles remained the same, and after a moment of careful probing, she found what she was looking for. "Got it," she murmured, sliding the needle into the vein with practiced precision. "This is the anti-parasitic compound. It should start attacking the worms within a few hours." Zira flinched at the prick of the needle, a low growl rumbling in her throat, but she did not pull away. Daniel knelt nearby, one hand resting on the creature's flank, speaking in the same soft, reassuring tone that Lisa had used. He could feel the heat radiating from Zira's body, far higher than it should be, a sign that her immune system was fighting a losing battle against the invaders in her blood. "It's okay, girl," he said. "I know it hurts, but this is going to help you. Just stay calm for us." The second injection followed, a cocktail of immune boosters designed to strengthen Zira's natural defenses. Lisa watched the scanner readings carefully, looking for any sign of adverse reaction, any indication that the alien biology was rejecting the Earth-derived medications. To her relief, the readings remained stable, showing a gradual but steady improvement in Zira's vital signs. "Her body's accepting the treatment," Lisa reported, allowing herself a small smile. "The ivermectin is already binding to the parasites. We should see the worm count start to drop within the next few hours. What do we do now?" "We wait, and we keep her comfortable." That proved to be a challenge in itself. Zira had been lying in the same position for days, her muscles cramped and sore from lack of movement. Lisa gently stretched her limbs while Daniel cleaned the worst of the matted fur, removing clumps of dead hair and dried blood that had accumulated around the sores on her skin. It was messy, unpleasant work, the kind of work that the Kelrani would never have considered doing for a mere animal. But to Daniel and Lisa, It felt natural, necessary, an expression of the same instinct that had driven humans to care for sick creatures since the dawn of their species. "You know, I used to work at an animal shelter back in Ohio," Lisa said as she worked, her voice quiet in the dim cargo hold. "We'd get animals in terrible condition all the time. Dogs that had been abused, cats that had been abandoned, horses that were so malnourished they could barely stand. The other workers would sometimes say we should just put them down, save them the suffering, but I never could." Daniel nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "My father was the same way. We had a bull once that got caught in a barbed wire fence, tore himself up so badly the vet said he'd never walk again. My dad spent 3 months nursing that animal back to health, changing his bandages every day, feeding him by hand when he was too weak to eat on his own. Did he make it? Lived another 8 years, strongest bull in the county." Lisa smiled, her eyes never leaving the scanner. "That's what humans do. We don't give up on living things. It's not in our nature." Hours passed as they worked, taking turns monitoring Zira's condition and administering additional doses of medication. The ship's artificial lighting shifted from day cycle to night cycle, the corridors outside the cargo hold growing quiet as most of the crew retired to their quarters. It was risky, staying here so long, but neither Daniel nor Lisa was willing to leave their patient alone. Around the 4th hour, Zira began to show signs of improvement. Her breathing steadied, the wet rattle in her chest fading to a softer, more regular rhythm. Her temperature dropped closer to normal levels, and the scanner showed that the crimson threadworms were dying, their numbers decreasing with each passing minute. The ivermectin was working. "She's fighting back," Lisa said, her voice thick with emotion. "Her immune system is rallying. The medication gave her the boost she needed, and now her body is doing the rest." Daniel felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, a reaction he quickly blinked away. He was a scientist, trained to observe and analyze without emotional attachment. But in this moment, watching this magnificent creature begin her slow climb back from the edge of death, he could not help but feel a profound sense of joy. They brought food next, synthesized meat from the human provisions that most closely matched the shadow cat's natural diet. Zira was too weak to eat on her own, so Lisa tore the meat into small pieces and hand-fed her, placing each morsel gently at the edge of her mouth and waiting patiently for the creature to swallow. It was a slow process, taking nearly an hour to get a meaningful amount of nutrition into her system. But Lisa never showed any sign of frustration or impatience. "Come on, beautiful," she cooed. "Just a little more. You need your strength." Zira's 6 eyes, still clouded, but now showing sparks of returning awareness, fixed on Lisa's face as she ate. There was something in that gaze, something that went beyond mere animal instinct, a recognition of the care and kindness being shown to her. When the last piece of meat was gone, Zira lifted her head and pressed it against Lisa's chest, a gesture that in any Earth cat would have been a sign of affection and trust. Daniel watched the scene with a lump in his throat. "She knows." "Of course she knows," Lisa replied, wrapping her arms around the massive creature's neck. "Animals always know when someone cares about them. It doesn't matter what planet they're from or what species they are. Kindness is a universal language." They continued their vigil through the night, taking short naps in shifts while the other monitored Zira's condition. The improvement continued, slow but steady, each hour bringing new signs that the shadow cat was winning her battle against the parasites. Her fur began to look less dull, her eyes began to clear, and at one point she even attempted to stand, her legs shaky but functional beneath her. "Easy, girl," Daniel said, supporting her weight as she wobbled. "Don't push yourself too hard. You've got a long way to go yet." Zira looked at him with those strange, beautiful eyes, and Daniel could have sworn he saw gratitude in their amber depths. Then she settled back down onto the floor, her massive head resting on his lap as she drifted into a peaceful, healing sleep. Lisa sat down beside them, exhaustion etched on her face, but satisfaction glowing in her eyes. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." "Not yet," Daniel replied, but he was smiling. "She's still got a long recovery ahead of her, and we still have to deal with Vorthax when he finds out what we've done. But yeah, I think we're gonna pull this off." Outside the cargo hold, the ship continued its endless journey through the stars, carrying dozens of species who would never understand what had happened in this small corner of their vessel. But Daniel and Lisa understood, and more importantly, Zira understood. Humanity had come to the stars, and they had brought their compassion with them. Commander Vorthax received the report at precisely 7 hours into the morning cycle. A junior Kelrani officer named Crix had detected anomalies in the cargo hold monitoring system during a routine security check, and upon investigating, had discovered something that defied everything the commander thought he understood about the humans aboard his ship. The two human scientists were sitting on the floor of the cargo hold, surrounded by medical equipment and empty food containers, and between them lay Zira, the Varaxian shadowcat that Vorthax had personally condemned to death less than 2 standard days ago. Except she was not dead. She was not even dying. She was awake and alert, her 6 eyes tracking the junior officer's movements with the sharp awareness of a healthy predator. Vorthax moved through the ship's corridors with purposeful strides, his mandibles clicking in a pattern that other Kelrani would recognize as extreme agitation. He had served the Coalition for over 40 cycles, had commanded research vessels through some of the most dangerous regions of known space, had dealt with insubordinate crew members of dozens of different species, but he had never encountered anything quite like this. The cargo hold doors slid open, and Vorthax stepped inside to find exactly what the report had described. Daniel Cooper and Lisa Brennan sat on either side of Zira, their faces showing the exhaustion of a sleepless night, but also something else, something that looked almost like defiance. The Shadowcat herself lifted her head at his approach, and to his absolute astonishment, she growled, a low warning sound that he had not heard from her since the day she was first captured. "What have you done?" Vorthax demanded, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into cold, sharp words. "I gave explicit orders that this creature was to receive no treatment. I declared her a lost cause, and commanded that no resources be wasted on her care." Daniel rose to his feet, positioning himself between the commander and Zira, in a gesture that might have seemed threatening if not for the obvious size difference between them. "With respect, Commander, your orders were wrong." Wrong? The concept seemed to confuse Vorthax more than anger him. There is no wrong or right in such matters. There is only efficiency and waste. The creature was dying. Treatment was impossible. Therefore, allowing her to expire naturally was the logical course of action. "Except treatment wasn't impossible," Lisa said, also standing but keeping one hand on Zira's flank in a soothing gesture. "Your medical databases had no solution because they were designed by species who don't understand warm-blooded parasites. Humans have been treating these kinds of infections for centuries. We knew we could help her, and we weren't willing to let her die just because you said it couldn't be done." Vorthax's compound eyes shifted between the two humans, trying to process what he was hearing. In his experience, crew members who disobeyed direct orders did so for personal gain, for political advantage, for some logical benefit that outweighed the risk of punishment. But these humans had gained nothing from their actions, had risked their careers and possibly their freedom for the sake of an animal that was not even of their species. "I do not understand," he admitted, and the admission clearly cost him. "You have violated Coalition protocols. You have disobeyed a direct command from your superior officer. You have potentially exposed this vessel to unknown medical risks by introducing untested treatments. For a creature that cannot thank you, cannot reward you, cannot even comprehend what you have done for her. She understands, Daniel said quietly. Maybe not in words, but she understands. As if to prove his point, Zira rose unsteadily to her feet, her massive body still weak from her ordeal, but showing clear signs of recovery. She moved past Daniel, past Lisa, and stopped directly in front of Vorthax, her 6 eyes fixed on his compound ones. For a long moment, Predator and Commander simply looked at each other. Then Zira hissed, a sharp sound of warning and rejection, and turned her back on the Kelrani, who had been willing to let her die. Vorthax stood in stunned silence. Zira had been his companion for nearly 5 cycles, had traveled with him across dozens of star systems, had been present at some of the most important moments of his career. He had never thought of her as anything more than a useful tool, an exotic specimen that impressed visiting dignitaries and served as a conversation piece at diplomatic functions. But now, watching her press her body against the humans who had saved her life, he felt something he could not identify. She knows who cared for her, Lisa said, her voice gentle rather than accusatory. Animals remember kindness, Commander. They remember who was there for them when they were suffering, and they remember who walked away. This is not logical, Vorthax protested, but his voice had lost its sharp edge. Emotional attachment to other species serves no evolutionary purpose. It wastes resources that could be spent on one's own survival and reproduction. Daniel shook his head. That's where you're wrong, Commander. Back on Earth, humans formed bonds with other species for thousands of years, and those bonds made us stronger, not weaker. Dogs helped us hunt and protected our homes. Cats controlled the pests that threatened our food supplies. Horses carried us across continents. We survived because we learned to work with other creatures, to care for them and earn their loyalty in return. And it went beyond mere utility, Lisa added. We came to value those creatures for themselves, not just for what they could do for us. We developed what you would call emotional attachment, and that attachment drove us to protect them, heal them, and fight for them, even when there was no logical reason to do so. Vorthax was silent for a long time, his antennae twitching as he processed this information. He had studied human history, had read about their strange relationships with the animals of their home world, but he had always dismissed it as primitive sentimentality, a weakness that more advanced species had evolved beyond. Now, looking at the recovered Shadowcat and the exhausted humans who had saved her, he was not so sure. You understand that I cannot simply overlook this breach of protocol, he finally said. There must be consequences for disobeying orders. We know, Daniel replied, and we're prepared to accept whatever punishment you decide. But we do it again, Commander. We do it 100 times. Vorthax studied the human's face, looking for signs of deception or regret, and finding none. Why? What compels you to take such risks for a creature that is not of your kind? It was Lisa who answered, her voice soft but firm. Because that's what it means to be human, Commander. We don't turn our backs on suffering. We don't abandon the helpless. We don't give up on living things just because saving them is difficult or inconvenient. Our ancestors learned those lessons long ago, and they're written into our very nature. She paused, looking down at Zira, who had settled at her feet like a loyal guardian. Maybe it doesn't make sense to you. Maybe it seems illogical and wasteful, but it's who we are, and we wouldn't change it even if we could. The cargo hold fell silent as Vorthax considered her words. Around them, the ship hummed with the quiet sounds of technology and distant crew movements, a reminder that life continued beyond this small confrontation. Finally, the commander straightened his tall insectoid body and made a decision. You will not be punished, he announced, and both humans looked at him in surprise. Instead, you will document everything you have done, every treatment you administered, every technique you employed. This knowledge will be added to the Coalition medical databases, so that others may benefit from your expertise. Daniel blinked. You're serious? The Coalition values efficiency above all else, Vorthax replied. And it would be inefficient to punish crew members who have demonstrated capabilities that the rest of us lack. Your methods may be driven by emotion rather than logic, but they achieved results that our own science could not. That is worth preserving. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. I do not understand you humans. I suspect I never will. But perhaps understanding is not required. Perhaps it is enough to simply acknowledge that you are different, and that your differences have value. The door closed behind him, leaving Daniel and Lisa alone with Zira. They looked at each other, exhaustion and relief and disbelief, all mixed together on their faces. Did that actually just happen? Lisa asked. Daniel laughed, a sound that released all the tension he had been carrying. I think it did. I think we actually won. Zira lifted her head and made a sound, something between a purr and a rumble that vibrated through the floor. It was a sound of contentment, of safety, of belonging. And in that moment, it was the only reward the humans needed. 2 weeks had passed since the confrontation in the cargo hold, and the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Zira moved through the corridors of the horizon's edge with the powerful grace of a fully healthy predator, her obsidian fur gleaming under the artificial lights, her 6 amber eyes bright with intelligence and awareness. Crew members from a dozen different species stepped aside as she passed, some out of fear, others out of simple surprise at seeing an animal that should have been dead walking among them. But Zira paid them no attention. She had only one destination in mind. The human quarters were located in the ship's starboard section, a small cluster of rooms that had been modified to accommodate the unique needs of Earth's dominant species. The lighting was softer here, the temperature warmer, the air carrying subtle scents that other species found strange, but that humans found comforting. It was here that Daniel and Lisa had made their home during the long mission, and it was here that Zira went every morning without fail. Daniel was sitting at his desk, reviewing data on his tablet, when he heard the familiar sound of claws clicking on metal. He turned to find Zira pushing through the door, her massive head appearing first, followed by her sleek body as she squeezed through an opening designed for creatures half her size. She had learned to operate the door controls weeks ago, a feat of intelligence that had impressed even Vorthax. Good morning, beautiful, Daniel said, setting aside his tablet as Zira padded over to him. Sleep well? The shadow cat responded by pressing her head against his chest, a gesture of affection that had become routine between them. Daniel wrapped his arms around her thick neck and scratched behind her ears, earning a deep purr that rumbled through his entire body. It was strange, he thought, how quickly this alien creature had become such an important part of his life. Lisa appeared in the doorway a moment later, 2 cups of synthesized coffee in her hands, and a smile on her face. I see our patient is making her rounds again. Right on schedule, Daniel agreed, accepting one of the cups. I'm starting to think she has a better sense of time than most of the crew. She probably does. Cats on Earth were always good at knowing when it was feeding time. They sat together in comfortable silence, Zira sprawled across both their laps in a position that should have been impossible for a creature her size, but which she somehow made work. Through the window, stars drifted slowly past, distant suns that each represented a world full of life and possibility. It was moments like this that reminded Daniel why he had joined the Coalition in the first place, the chance to explore, to discover, to make connections across the vast emptiness of space. The door chimed, and Commander Vorthax's voice came through the speaker. May I enter? Daniel and Lisa exchanged surprised glances. The commander had never visited their quarters before, had barely spoken to them since the day of the confrontation. "Come in," Daniel called, and the door slid open to reveal the tall Kelrani standing in the corridor. Vorthax's compound eyes immediately fixed on Zira, and for a moment, something that might have been regret passed across his alien features. The shadow cat, for her part, lifted her head and regarded her former owner with cool indifference before settling back down across the human's laps. "I have come to inform you that word of your actions has spread beyond this vessel," Vorthax said, his translator rendering his clicks into formal, measured tones. "Several coalition worlds have requested your assistance with their own ailing creatures. It seems that human veterinary techniques are in high demand." Lisa nearly choked on her coffee. "They want our help?" "Indeed. The Melvoni have a species of aquatic mammal suffering from a similar parasitic infection. The Sithari are struggling with a disease affecting their livestock. Even my own people have begun to wonder if human methods might help with certain problems we have long considered unsolvable." Daniel leaned forward, careful not to disturb Zira. "And what do you think, Commander?" Vorthax was silent for a long moment. "I think that I have spent my entire life believing that efficiency was the highest virtue, that emotion was weakness, that attachment to other species was a primitive impulse that more advanced beings should have evolved beyond. I believed these things because they were what I was taught, what my entire species was taught, and it never occurred to me to question them." He moved closer, his tall form casting a shadow over the small group. "But watching you save Zira, watching you form a bond with her that goes beyond anything I thought possible, has made me realize that perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps there are forms of strength that cannot be measured in logic and efficiency. Perhaps compassion has value that my people have never learned to see." Lisa set down her coffee cup, her expression softening. "Commander, that might be the nicest thing you've ever said to us." "Do not mistake my words for sentimentality," Vorthax replied, though his tone lacked its usual sharpness. "I am simply acknowledging a gap in Kelrani understanding. Whether we choose to address that gap remains to be seen." He turned to leave, then paused. "I have arranged for you to take a shuttle to the Melvoni homeworld. Their medical council is eager to learn from you. I trust you will represent humanity well." The door closed behind him, and Daniel let out a long breath. Did that really just happen? "I think we might have actually changed his mind about something," Lisa said, wonder in her voice. "I didn't think that was possible." Zira stretched and yawned, revealing rows of sharp teeth that could have torn through armor plating. Then she curled up tighter, her massive body radiating warmth and contentment. Whatever had just happened between the commander and the humans, she clearly did not consider it worth interrupting her nap. Over the following months, Daniel and Lisa traveled to a dozen different worlds, teaching alien species techniques that humans had developed over thousands of years. They showed the Melvoni how to use gentle handling to calm frightened animals. They taught the Sithari about the importance of nutrition in fighting disease. They introduced the concept of animal rehabilitation to species who had never considered that injured creatures could be healed and returned to health. Everywhere they went, they encountered the same initial skepticism. Other species could not understand why humans cared so much about creatures that were not their own, could not comprehend the depth of emotional connection that humans formed with animals. But the results spoke for themselves, and slowly, attitudes began to change. And through it all, Zira remained at their side. She had become something of a celebrity throughout the coalition, the shadow cat who had been saved by human compassion. Other species would stop and stare when she passed, watching in amazement as the fearsome predator walked calmly beside her human companions, occasionally allowing strangers to touch her gleaming fur if they approached with the proper respect. One evening, after a particularly long day of consultations on the Kelrani homeworld, Daniel sat alone in a garden that had been specially constructed for the visiting humans. The plants were all synthesized imitations of Earth flora, but the effect was convincing enough to trigger a wave of homesickness. He missed the real grass, the real trees, the real wind that carried the scent of growing things. Zira appeared beside him, her movements so silent that he did not notice her until she pressed her head against his shoulder. He reached up to scratch her ears, marveling once again at how far they had come since that first night in the cargo hold. "You know what, girl?" he said softly. "I think we might actually be making a difference out here. I think we might be teaching these aliens something important." Zira made a sound, something between a purr and a chirp, that seemed to indicate agreement. "Humans spent so long wondering if we were alone in the universe," Daniel continued. "We looked up at the stars and imagined all the different forms that life might take, all the civilizations we might encounter. But I don't think any of us imagined this. I don't think we realized that the most important thing we'd have to teach wasn't technology or science, but compassion." He looked up at the artificial stars projected on the garden ceiling. "Maybe that's our purpose out here. Maybe that's what humanity brings to the galaxy that no other species can. Not just our intelligence or our adaptability, but our hearts. Our stubborn, illogical, beautiful hearts that refuse to give up on suffering creatures. That insist on caring even when it makes no sense." Zira settled down beside him, her warmth a comfort against the artificial chill of the garden's climate system. Together, they watched the fake stars shine. Two creatures from different worlds, bound by something that transcended species and logic and the vast emptiness of space. Somewhere in the distance a door opened, and Lisa's voice called out, "Daniel, are you out here? The Kelrani Medical Council wants to schedule another session tomorrow." "Be right there," he called back. Then to Zira, "Come on, beautiful, we've got more work to do." The shadow cat rose gracefully to her feet, her 6 eyes gleaming with something that looked very much like purpose. She had been abandoned once, left to die by beings who could not understand her worth. But the humans had seen something in her that others had missed. And in saving her, they had started something much larger than themselves. The universe was changing, one act of compassion at a time, and humanity was leading the way. As Daniel and Zira walked out of the garden together, the artificial stars continued to shine behind them, a reminder that even in the darkest corners of space, light could always be found. All it took was someone willing to look for it.